All right, here we are with another video talking about Red Rising. I've seen a lot of reviews about this book, a lot of people talking about this, the series in general. There's 6 books now. I think there will be a 7th next year or the year after. But there were a lot of recommendations for this. It has really good Goodreads score, and the story of how Pierce Brown became published is very interesting to me. I just think it's interesting to see how people become published in general. So that's part of the reason why I really wanted to see what this was about. So I read this book, and then I read books 2 and 3. We'll do a spoiler-free review of the first 3 books, primarily the first book, because I feel like it's hard to review subsequent books without talking about what's in them, spoiler-wise. But I think we can do that with the first one, and then we'll get into some spoiler talk and dive into the whole first trilogy. Book 1, it's similar to what it says on the back. It's a pretty fair back cover. You've got a society. There's some subterfuge. The people at the bottom don't realize that there's prosperity, and our main character is put into disguise to infiltrate that higher society, and he gets put into a Hunger Games type scenario. And I know that maybe it's not the most fair comparison, but that's what I'm comparing it to because that's what I know. I think most everyone has read or seen The Hunger Games. It does a lot of what The Hunger Games does. Like I said, you have this society, caste system, these divided by classes, people at the bottom, people at the top, a big disparity between wealth. And obviously that's, an example of our society, of our world today. And I think it does some of that stuff really well. The first book is very much a setup book. It's good in its own right, but it has a lot of things that you go, okay, this is maybe too much dragged on. It's maybe too slow in parts, especially when they get to the Institute and they actually have the Hunger Games type thing. But a lot of it's set up, and you're getting to spend a lot of time with all these characters because you want to have all these interactions for the later books, for book 2 and book 3. And so in knowing the whole trilogy, you forgive some of the slow sluggishness of book 1 just because it's set up. And I think it's, in that sense, it's okay. If this is the only book you read, I don't think it stands on its own. So that would be my critique. I believe I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, whereas I gave the other 2s 5 out of 5s, because I just feel like this one, it doesn't necessarily stand on its own. It is setting stuff up. But I like I like novels to be their own thing, if possible. Maybe this has the same thing as Lord of the Rings, where Tolkien writes the Lord of the Rings and the publishers say, no, break it up into 3 books. It's too much of a story. And so that's where we have those 3 parts, whereas maybe this was the same thing, where he writes Red Rising and Golden Sun, and it's one completed document. And the publishers go, no, break this up into 2. Just have that, you spend so much time at the beginning setting things up. That's one novel. Because that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like the first half of a book. I know there's some comments about Darrow as a character. Is he a Gary Stu, the Mary Sue equivalent? He can't do anything wrong. He's always gets everything right. I did feel that a little bit because he's a slave. He comes from nothing. He doesn't know anything. He has time when he's becoming this disguised character to learn that stuff. And we're led to believe that his desire and his will is so strong that that's what overcomes. And that's what allows him to be so good at everything that he does. Because he really is just superior to everybody else. It's obviously first person perspective. And so, maybe you could say, well, it's, he's not a honest narrator. I don't know if I really buy that. I think we're just taking the story as it is. But the first book is good. Books 2 and 3 are far better, in my opinion. Book 2, the pacing is insane. It's just quick. It's fast. So much goes on. The character dramas just build up and build up. It's really, really good. It's a lot of fun. Book 3 as well. It has a good climax, a lot of good building. And it asks all these science fiction questions that I think is just classic to science fiction. Something about big society, wealth, modern technology, and how that affects us as a people and how we expand as a species just with time going on, and there's more and more and more of us. It does a really good job. It's well paced. It's fun. There's a lot of action. It is a little brutal at times. So if you're worried about content, it's mostly clean. Because of the language that they speak, the language is pretty tame. There's some brutality as far as violence goes, and that's probably primarily in the first book. It's maybe the worst at the Institute, which is their Hunger Games battle royale type thing. But yeah, I read the first book and I was a little put off because I thought there's nothing super special about this. The setting is interesting, but it's not that exciting. But I was just hopeful that books 2 and 3 would take off and really set them, set the whole series apart, and it really does. So I recommend reading it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's one of the best trilogies I've probably ever read, and it's a great book. Okay, so getting into some spoiler things. We're going to talk about Red Rising first, and we'll probably jump around a little bit to all of them just because there's a lot of foreshadowing. There's things that are set up early on that get paid off towards the end of the series, or of the trilogy, I should say. So the first act of the book, the beginning, going from being a slave, his wife dying, getting to the Sons of Ares taking him in, getting carved, going through that whole process, getting to the Institute, lying through his teeth, being a gold, and then getting to chapter 19, the passage. It's incredible. It's some of the best opening scenes I've ever read in any book. The pacing is really good. Chapter 19 is one of the best scenes still in the entire book. It came out of nowhere. I was so surprised. When I say something is fantastic and something is incredible, it's not because I align with it on a moral level, but because it's really well done. And that chapter 19 is fantastic. And then we get to the Institute, and it's just, to me, it's just kind of boring and slow, and it's just brutal. And the kids are just, they don't really see any sense of doing good. It's just about winning. It's just about surviving to the point of killing. And they're not really supposed to kill each other. We kind of learn that later on. We have the reveal that Severo is Fitchner's son, Mustang and Adrius / the Jackal, that as being twins, that relationship. The fact that he's friends with Cassius and he killed his brother, it's tough because on the one hand, they're all supposed to be logical and they're supposed to just go, no, what's for the betterance of the society? And this is just the way that the thing is. And so Cassius, would he really have that much of a blood feud with Darrow? I don't know if he really would. Some of that is kind of hard to say. The series really does get into family drama as it goes on. And it's just, eagles versus lions and whatever. But that, to me, as the series goes on, it's like, is it really so realistic that Cassius just hates him so much? He had no choice. He wasn't going to let himself die. What would happen if Cassius and Julian were in the same room together? And that was, I don't know. So that's a little bit perturbing. I don't know that I'm fully on board with believing that Cassius would hate him for the whole series. It works, obviously, and if we just take it as what it is, it's like that's a story, and Cassius hates Darrow, which is fine. The ending is good. I was not expecting there to be this assault on Olympus. That was surprising, and it was really quick. As soon as we decide that's what we're gonna do, it just goes and it flies, and that's when Pierce Brown is his best. And I think maybe he was just figuring that out in the first book, because all the setup stuff is fine, and I know that it was important. Again, as I've said before, it was important to set up book 1 to get us to books 2 and 3. But when he's just flying through pace and things are just happening at this rapid bullet speed, that's when the books are just fantastic and the writing is really good. So when they go to Olympus, that's just it's a frenzy and it's really, really good. I was not expecting it. It's a lot of fun, and then he chooses Andromedas at the end. So the guy who kills his wife, there's just some really good intrigue there, and the book ends, and you're ready to set up book 2. Book 2, if we can move on to that, as far as spoilers go, I don't know that I have much else for book 1. So book 2, just far superior. He starts 2 years in the future, past the academy. He has all these military accomplishments, and he's just Darrow Andromedas, and he's just really good. And again, we could sort of get to the Gary Stu kind of thing, but he does fail right away in the book. And so I wonder if that was Pierce Brown going, no, he's not perfect, he's flawed. I wanted to write a character with depth, to kind of combat those comments. Okay, so some of the things to highlight, I think, in book 2, we have Darrow's wife, Ao. I hope that's how you pronounce it, Ao. She is pregnant, or she was pregnant right before she is hanged, because Darrow is given the recording of that hanging, and so he's able to hear what she says right before she dies. And to me, that doesn't, it doesn't change a whole lot. It's just added fuel, I guess, and to kind of add fuel to his character for book 2, because book 1, the whole thing is my wife was killed unjustly. I want revenge, and I want my people to be free. And so then we add in a baby just to compound the emotional impact. Again, not surprising. I think it's fine. It works. But I don't know that I read that and thought like, oh, my jaw dropped. Like this is, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Because again, I think looking at it from a writing standpoint, it just makes sense. I will say this from a writing standpoint that's not related to spoilers at all. But there's a couple points in books 1 and book 2 that I think really stand out as far as pointing out how good of a writer Pierce Brown is in regard to brevity. Because book 1, he goes through the carving, and that's, I think in the book, if I remember correctly, it's like a year span of time, maybe 6 months or something. If I was writing that book, I would have written out so much of what happens in that time, and it wouldn't have just been a chapter. It would have been 8 chapters or 10 chapters, and I would have just drug out so much of that stuff, and it's not necessary. He does a really good job of, when it's not necessary, it doesn't need to be there, which is kind of why I'm retroactively okay with the slowness of the Institute stuff in book 1, because it pays off in the end. And then the second part of that is in book 2, where 2 years have passed. He's 20 years old. We didn't need to see all the academy. That was my fear. My fear was book 1 is going to be Hunger Games, but it's Greeks. And then book 2 is going to be this academy of schooling, and it's going to be, adult Harry Potter, not magic, but science and, war tactics. And I was just not looking forward to that. And so it didn't do that. And I thought that was really good. If I was writing the book, again, I probably would have had the 2 years at the academy been an entire book. And this would have been a 4-book series just to get through that first trilogy. So props to Pierce Brown for doing that correctly. So beyond his first failure, AO revealing that she's pregnant, or, seeing the recording of that, we get to the gala, and we get to this scene where Darrow's like, yeah, I'm just going to have civil war. We're just going to destroy the galaxy because they all suck. I don't like any of them. So we get to that scene. He is fighting Cassius kind of in a, bravado, defend your pride, defend your honor kind of thing. And he reveals that he was training under Lorne the entire time. I did not like that. That was the one thing I did not like about this book. And I know that he likes to hide things so that he can have a reveal. It's sort of the, we gathered everyone together to discuss the plan. And then the next chapter is, we're in the part of the plan. And so that way, we don't tell the reader, but, we admit that there's something going on. Which I think that's sort of fine, because it is a little dicey when you're in a first person perspective. He has all the thoughts. He knows what's going on in his mind, which I think is tricky. And Pierce Brown does it really well at the end of book 3 when they're going to get the Sovereign. However, to what I'm saying about the gala and Lorne, it doesn't work, because I didn't see any foreshadowing. I was so confused because he's heralded as this incredible swordsman, the best fighter in the galaxy. He doesn't fight anymore, but he has all these sayings that Darrow likes to say sometimes. And then I was a student and I'm really good. And it was, I think it wasn't fair. I guess that's what it comes down to. I would have liked a little bit more foreshadowing for it. Maybe a couple, not like slip ups necessarily, but a little bit of foreshadowing that would lead us to know. And maybe there is, and maybe, somebody could pull up a Reddit forum where people talk about it and they could prove me wrong. I remember reading it and just thinking, this doesn't make any sense. I scrambled back to the beginning of the book. I scrambled to the end of Red Rising. I could not find where it made sense to me. So I was confused at that. I understand you wanted it to be a surprise. I just didn't love it. So that was one of my problems with it. Something else that I really liked, the Ragnar stuff is cool. Gives us the same feeling of him at the Institute, trying to prove that they don't have to be brutal to each other. They can be friends. And so he gives Ragnar his freedom, and that he becomes his most loyal bodyguard, which is cool. So that's all really good. Chapter 38 is one that stands out, Iron Rain. That's probably maybe the best chapter in the book, or maybe the very final chapter, because the final chapter is just shocking. But chapter 38, the Iron Rain, the way he describes it, something that we don't it's not real, you know? It's not real to be shot out of a cannon like a bullet in a mech suit, to crash onto another ship, to dig into the ship, to attack. It's none of it's real. And we can only grasp how he writes it. And he does it such a good job of it. It's a fantastic chapter, and it's fun too because he sets up this Iron Rain, this mythical Iron Rain, this thing that this military tactic, this strategy that tons of people have, you know, used in the past, maybe, or it's an idea that people have used, and he just does it, and it's really, really good for that combat. All of the politics are really good in this book. All of the drama, it's so much family stuff is really good. So then we get to the attack on the Citadel, and that's a really great sequence as well. We have this plan, this trick. Mustang is involved, and Cassius figures out what they're going to do, or anticipates it, and it fails, and they fall into the water, and their suits are shot, and we think that they're dead. And it's like, yeah, Darrow's going to escape because he's superior. Ragnar escapes, that makes sense. But now we got to fight off the enemies and then get back down and save our friends. And they do, but it's a really good scene, really, really tense. And then we get to the place where he's going to actually succeed in getting to Octavia, the Sovereign, and try to kill her. And he jumps into the ship, and it's just this kind of cool sequence. And then he's surrounded, and there's just no chance. And he's like, yeah, he's definitely going to die. And I legitimately did not see a way out of it as I was reading it. And then Fitchner, being, you know, kind of his mentor, proctor, person from the Institute, Octavia says, okay, Fitchner, you need to be the one to kill him. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. And so then you kind of hate Fitchner because he's switched at this point in the story. But you're kind of torn because now he starts to seem like he's showing a little bit of remorse. And then he has this great about face where he kills the people in the ship, escapes with Darrow. He's Ares. He's the leader of this whole rebellion this whole time. So we get back, and Darrow and Mustang have this moment together, and then we get to this place where Darrow goes, I really like Mustang, but I don't want to have secrets anymore because I've already lost Roke some, because I've not told him everything. He wants to be as open and honest as he can with Mustang, and so he takes her back to Mars, back to the pits, back to the mines, to show her what his world is like, who he actually is, the video of the carving. He has this interaction with his mom, and that's really sweet. And then Mustang, you know, in character, I think the way you would write it poorly is she just goes to his side, and she just realizes, yeah, you're right, everything's bad. I shouldn't be so harsh. I don't care that you're red. I like you anyways. But no, instead, what does she do? She tries to kill him, or she puts a gun in his face. But then you have this scene where Darrow and Ragnar strip their weapons off, kneel down, and say, hey, you know, you're going to have to actually do this because we're not coming to you trying to get anything. We're just coming to you as a friend. Well, then she leaves. And so he's kind of like, yeah, what was I thinking was going to happen? You know, who was I to think that Mustang would be on my side? You know, she's got other things in play. I was asking too much for her, putting her on the spot. Good idea, bad location, all that stuff. So then we get to the celebration where Darrow is, you know, setting up this feast to go, hey, you know, we did something good. We won. Everything is okay. And everything's not okay. They kill a lot of people. Roke betrays him. It's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. Darrow gets captured. The book ends. Fantastic. And I didn't even mention the Jackal. And I think in hearing reviews of this book, people talk about the Jackal, how he's this incredible villain. I just don't really see it that much. I think there's better villains in the series. He's just kind of a spoiled brat, and maybe that's the idea. Is Pierce Brown sees the true villains as weak, and so then that's the way he writes them. Because the other villains are better than the Jackal is, in my opinion. And the Jackal betrays people and he lies, but he was never good. Like, you know, Darrow makes an alliance with him, but it wasn't a good alliance. It didn't, you know, it was sort of a necessity. You know, Darrow kind of had to work with the Jackal. Didn't really have an option. And so then when the Jackal betrays him, you're not really that surprised. And when he kills people, you're not really that surprised. And then even later on in the books, the only thing that was surprising was at the end of book 3, where he has the bombs and he's bombed the whole planet, or he's wired the whole planet to be bombed. But otherwise, I just don't see the Jackal as that terrifying of a character. Maybe I'm missing something, but all in all, I think Golden Sun surpasses Red Rising in almost all aspects. It's one of the best books I think I've ever read. It's way up on the list. It surpasses the 5-point scale. It's just brilliant. It's so fast. It's so much fun. Just a lot going on. Drama, intrigue, politics, backstabbing, spies, just so many good aspects of it. The combat's really good. The space battles are really good. It's incredible. And then finally we have Morning Star, the grand finale of the whole thing, the end of all ends, the conclusion of the trilogy. This does feel like the end of the series. And I know it's not the end. I know there's more books. I have 2 of them up on my shelf. And there's a 6th and then a 7th coming out at some point. So there is more to read in this world. But to me, this does feel like a very final ending. And you could, there's a lot of questions that aren't answered, and they maybe can't be answered. And I think the biggest of those is what to do with all the people once they're free. And I know that maybe sounds callous to think, but in this book, Darrow has a really interesting conversation with his mom about Mars and the mines and what would happen if they're free, if they stop mining. She basically says, well, they would be happy that they're free now and happy that they're no longer under the gold rule, but they would go back to the mines. They would go back to work. They would still do the things that they did. They just would feel better about it. And so that, I think, is such an interesting thing to think about, is what if we win, what other system are we going to put in place? And ultimately, they just go back to another dictatorship. And so that's a really heavy concept that this book, I think, explores even more, because the beginning of this, he's in prison for 9 months. He's trapped. He has this kind of change of heart where he thinks, up to this point, he sort of thinks the end justified the means. If I kill 1,000 people to save 1,001 people, well, that was slightly better than the other version, and so good was done. But this, he sort of, at the beginning of this at least, he kind of rethinks that and thinks, no, I've done too much damage. I've hurt too many people. I want to change. I want to amend what I've done. And so I kind of thought things would be different. But then he goes and meets Severo, and here he gets rescued. That rescue mission, by the way, in the beginning of this, fantastic. Holiday and Trig, the brother and sister from Earth, really, really cool. Just a fast rush blur of things. Darrow makes the split-second decision to go back and save Victra, and that messes up their mission and eventually kills Trig, which again, you go into it expecting some of these things. It's, there's not everything can be brand new. And so that sacrifice kind of needed to be made, and then it set up Holiday and et cetera, et cetera. But that mission is really cool. You've got these Helldivers coming up out of the earth to rescue them. That was also really cool. And then his fallout with Severo, and that seemed kind of forced, but then it made sense because it was, Severo was put in a position that he didn't want to be in. He wasn't trying to be the leader. That wasn't really his group. His group was the Howlers, small, kind of crazy lunatic guerrilla force. That wasn't this massive, hey, I'm the leader of the rebellion. That's more Darrow's angle. So we have drama, we have politics, we have all the same setup. Darrow trying to figure out what to do. We have plots and plans. Jackal is bad, obviously. Darrow realizes that Severo's way is not working. The war is not going as it should. They're not winning, and there's too much chaos. Just rampant terrorism. Just killing people. It's not the way that we should do things. So Darrow kind of takes over, and then him and Severo have this fight, and they have that conflict resolution. I think that all works. I think everything with Quicksilver, the rescuing of him, seeing Mustang again, that's a cool scene. Ragnar obviously has more of a role in this book. He's second character almost. He's there all the time. Severo's second probably, but we go to Romulus, this new character, in the Outer Rim to get his help because he has a big fleet and he has a lot of money. So Darrow meets with him, but Roke is also there, and so we have this really cool meeting where those two have this kind of duel of powers. Who's going to woo Romulus to get his help, basically, in this conflict? And before that happens, they find these nukes hidden, and nukes that the Jackal has taken. And so Darrow makes this lie, kind of puts Roke in a bad spot, and wins the favor of Romulus. And then they go right into this fight. So that's a really cool scene where you have this weird honor system. Darrow, regrettably thinking because they get into the conflict and a lot of people die. Just tons of people are dying. Ships are dying. His friends are dying. They get their Helldivers. That's kind of a cool scene. It's another Iron Rain, if you will, because they get all these claw drills and attack the ship and just burrow through the ship. And so that's a pretty cool scene. And then they get to the main cabin, the flight deck or whatever you want to call it, where Roke is. And then they have this interaction where he has to realize, yeah, I've lost. I thought that all worked really, really well. It worked very well. And it's sad because, you kind of see Roke as this character who should have been Darrow's friend. And Darrow feels the same way. So that is tough, the way that all ends. But it makes sense. I think characters still align with who the characters are. So then we go to the ice sequence where Ragnar, Victra, Mustang, and Darrow go to Antarctica, basically, to get his mother to give them their warriors. And secretly, Ragnar's going to kill his mom. So that's kind of a sub little plot. But they get shot down, and turns out they're shot down by Cassius' ship, and he's got a bunch of obsidians or grays or whatever. And we kind of go through this survival sequence for like 60 pages. And reading it, I thought, man, this drags on. Like, is this super necessary? This is just a side quest. And it's really not that long. Like I said, I looked back and it was only like 60 pages, 65 pages of the book, of a 500-page book. So it's not that big of a section. It just read slowly. I'm not really sure. But you have this bit with Aja. You have this thing where they capture Cassius. And so that all works. And then you have the whole, like, the sequence where Ragnar's mom knows that she's sending her soldiers to go die and be slaves. And she knows that the gods above aren't actually gods, they're just golds in suit. And then she's killed by her daughter. And so you have some interesting things there towards the end of it. But I didn't love that part in the middle. It just kind of felt like a side quest. So after that, they get all of these Valkyrie to work with them. And they go back to have their final conflict. And the big battle is set up. And the battle is good. It's a good battle. It's a good conflict. He writes space fighting really well. He has this interaction with Cassius throughout the story to try to get him to recant, kind of, and to realize, and they forgive him a bunch. And you have that scene where they all gather together to kill Cassius because everybody kind of like turns. So all the, soldiers and Reds and whatever inside the ship are going to kill Cassius. And Severo goes, Cassius literally killed my dad. So it's my job to kill him. So he hangs Cassius. But then he goes, but I'm also a murderer. I've also killed a bunch of people. So he hangs himself. And just to prove, like, hey, everybody, we can't just kill him because he's a murderer. Which is, again, sort of weird. And it's kind of that classic thing of, like, we're going to kill thousands of henchmen on the way. But then once we get to the main bad guy, no, I'm above this. I'm above you. I'm not going to kill you. It's like, we killed everybody else, He's the one who really should die because all those henchmen were just soldiers. They probably don't really believe fully in the thing that they're working for. So I think we see that a little bit, but it is what it is. It's important for that scene because then Cassius, we have that bit where he shoots Severo, and Antonia's there and she's lunatic. But then they get captured. They're taken to the Sovereign, and that whole scene, as soon as Severo shot, I was like, nope, he's not shot. So that wasn't a surprise. You didn't get me there, Pierce. Nice try, Pierce. You can pull a lot of fast ones, but that one was not a fast one. However, the fast part was the Jackal hiding the bombs. So that was a cool bit, and that felt very Joker-esque. Like, oh, I've hit all these bombs. You need to reveal who you are. But in this case, it was you need to kill yourself, basically. And have the ultimate sacrifice, Darrow. Isn't that what you believe in, the ultimate sacrifice? So that was really, really good. That was really, really good. And then Darrow cuts out his tongue, and it's like, whoa. So you had some really cool moments, but I wasn't shocked. I didn't hate it. Again, I think it was the right thing to do, and it was written well. So then they defeat the Sovereign. Darrow kills her, and the Jackal is captured, and they win, and they establish Mustang as the new Empress. And everybody basically goes, okay, this is the new thing. We're just going to follow who's in charge. You've got the sign and the scepter and the seal of, the new empire or whatever. So you're the sovereign. Then everything is happy. Everything is good. Mustang and Darrow get together, and she tells him, hey, guess what? I was pregnant the whole time. So that was surprising. But it felt a little too much on the nose, a little too heavy-handed. Like, hey, let's add one more thing. I guess it makes sense. It was 9 months while he was in the brig, in the prison. And it wraps up everything very nicely, and it gives you a very happy ending. And maybe Brown is doing that on purpose to give us a worse second, half of the series. And worse by, I mean that in the terms of darkness, a darker second half of the series. Because because I have heard that it does get worse. It does get darker. I keep saying worse. It does get more dark. And so having kind of a pseudo happy ending here, I think overall, my final thoughts. Oh yeah, and Severo and Victor get married, which is fine. None of that was super exciting to me. So overall, brilliant trilogy. It's up there with some of the best I've read. I think it stands on its own. It's got a really good first person perspective. It nails the first person present really well. I think that's hard to write. I've tried, but it's the Hunger Games. It's the same thing. That first person present tense. It works for this. It keeps you in the rush of things. As a whole, all three books, it asks a lot of questions. It has a lot of interesting science fiction type things. We've conquered the galaxy. We've set up this, body modification heightened thing where, we can have people perfectly designed for each of their individual tasks. So that's really interesting. It does have some flaws, obviously. Maybe a little bit of Gary Stu-ness, but not too much. And I don't really mind it for some reason because I just think it's really enjoyable. It's a great series overall. I think it's a 10 out of 10, or it's a 15 out of 15, or maybe like a 14.5 out of 15, just because the first book is a little bit mundane. But overall, I would recommend it to anybody. I think it's very fun. It's very good. If you're looking for a good young adult / new adult series to read, science fiction, fantasy, epicness, good space battles, stuff that makes you question our own world, it does all that very, very well. So, have you read the first three books of the Red Rising trilogy? What did you think about them? Did you like them? Did you not like them? Were they slow? Were they fast? Good characters, bad characters? Are you looking forward to the rest of the series? Are you looking forward to book 7 if you read the other 6? Am I out of line with any of my comments or critiques or praise? If you have any comments on what I should read next, it can maybe be added to my TBR. If it's more stuff like this, I'm all up for it. Until the next video, thanks for watching.